is
Mm,
whatever you've decided to be the vision and the values of your company and the sustainability of the company.
yeah.
We look at sustainability, we need to understand that we need sustainability of the people as well.
Think back to the last conversation you remember at work about well-being. When was that? Okay, as you're trying to remember, let me welcome you back to the Work Positive Podcast. I'm Dr. Joey Fawcett, your host, and I'm guessing you may be unable to remember a well-being conversation at work, at least anytime soon. Yet if I ask you if well-being and peak performance are companions in a work positive culture, I'm sure you'd say, of course, Dr. J. There definitely is a disconnect for many companies around this importance of well-being. So let's talk about it today. My guest is a sought-after workplace well-being consultant, health and performance coach, workshop facilitator, and mindfulness teacher. She strengthens teams like yours in leadership, well-being, and performance. She received the 2025 Business Achievement Award from the Health Coaches of Australia and New Zealand in their association for her work delivering preventative health education and coaching in corporations. So let's give your colleagues something to talk about as we all lean in and learn how to create a work positive culture of well-being on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Work Positive Nation, she got up awfully early on a Saturday morning to do this podcast, so you know she's excited. You know I'm always excited. Ruth Kent is in the house, Work Positive Nation. Welcome, Ruth Kent from Australia.
Thank you so much for having me here, Joey.
Yeah. Uh, you've got a 5-year-old daughter, and I've got a 5-year-old granddaughter. We really should have gotten Bluey on this podcast today,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You know what? And I'm in Brisbane, which is where it is
I
based.
know.
I know all the streets and the different areas that they're talking about when they go to in the episodes and yeah, so I would have loved to bring Bluey here for you.
Our granddaughter loves Bluey so much. That's who she dressed up as for Halloween here. And her
Oh, wow.
4-month-old little sister was Bingo. And then
Oh,
dad was
cute.
dad and mom was mom. So I think it's one of the best parenting programs on TV today. I
Absolutely.
know the kids love it,
Absolutely.
but as a parent or now grandparent, I look at that and I go, wow, I would love to have been that good a parent as dad is when
Oh, I know, I
I was a
know. Yeah,
children.
look, we always get parenting tips from it, and I was telling you earlier, I even posted about it once or twice on LinkedIn because there were some messages in some of the episodes where I'm like, this is so important. I think we should share
Really
this,
is. I
and
know.
the feedback I got was just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The writers for that show are incredible
they
and the
are.
way they're able to bring it in. By the way, Ruth's LinkedIn profile URLs in our show notes, Work Positive Nation. So we'll talk more about how you can best contact her in a few minutes. And when we're talking about parenting, grandparenting, essential core values, or the way I like to think about them like this, that's all wrapped up in what you do, and that is help companies establish well-being and mindfulness as important parts of their culture. How did you get into this work? You're a superhero. What's your origin story?
Look, it's one of those things where you wonder where it all begins. But I think,
Uh-huh.
to be honest, I think good parenting for myself, where my parents were quite open-minded and raised me to be open-minded,
Hmm.
allowed me to join when I was 15 a retreat on meditation, and I learned to meditate. So that was 30 years ago.
Wow.
Um,
As
so
a
I've been
15-year-old
meditating.
old, you were meditating. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, which at the time that was the 90s,
Yeah.
wasn't really a thing. I was in outback, I was living in a small town in outback Queensland,
Mhm.
and my boyfriend at the time, he was my first serious boyfriend. His
Oh,
parents lived on a commune and they meditated, and all of this was very weird, from an external sort of
right.
mainstream point of view. But my parents, I remember asking my dad, what's going on there, and he explained what he understood them to be doing, and they've encouraged me to try
Mhm.
everything, all kinds of things, and different religions, and explore my
Mhm.
world.
Mhm.
And so they said, yeah, go and check it out. So one time, my boyfriend's mother said, look, we've got a retreat coming up, would you like to learn? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I came along to a 3-day retreat. And I think I was just very lucky that it was so well taught and the
Mm,
group was so amazing that I had a really, I always call it a hook, it really
mm,
hooked me in. The
mhm.
experience kept me there and I was really interested in it. And it just, I was amazed at the impact it had just even on the first, try of it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's been sort of an exploration of mine for the last 30 years. And
Mm.
I call it an anchor because it's something that's come and gone a little bit, especially in my 20s, where I was,
Yeah,
exploring the world and traveling and things like that.
absolutely.
But yeah, then I took it, I've taken it with me. Yeah, anytime I sort of lose myself or feel disconnected, it's usually that I've dropped my practice. I bring it back again. And I'd say the last 15 years or so, I've been very, very dedicated to a daily practice. And
Mm,
yeah, it's really made a big difference. And then from there, I went, I think that really opened up my interest in people
mm.
and the mind. And I went off and studied psychology at uni. And I felt when I was doing that study, I realized sort of halfway through, I don't actually want to be a psychologist. I didn't see myself treating patients one to one.
Mm,
Um, but I finished the degree off and I discovered at the end of the degree something called health sociology.
mm,
And I was like, what is this? And I went along and I looked at it and I'm like, this is so interesting to look at population health and the
mm,
way that, sort of psychological principles and behavioral principles can be applied to populations and affect
mhm,
behavior change within the groups
mhm,
and,
mhm,
prevent illness or promote health. And
mhm,
so I went from there on to study public health. So that for me was sort of that broader, like looking at this from sociocultural points of view, looking at
mhm,
communicable diseases, epidemiology,
mm.
again, health promotion campaigns and things like that. And I just loved it. And while I was doing that, that was in my 20s, I also taught English as a second language.
Ah,
So I traveled, I went around the world, went to South Korea, Japan, Brazil, around
mhm,
Australia. Well, I went into Australia, into Brisbane and started teaching down to Sydney and continued teaching. And
mhm,
so definitely felt like I developed a lot of facilitation and group work and, multicultural, cross-cultural awareness. And then, yeah, and around 2013, well, with my business, I'm sorry, with my teaching, I'd sort of reached this point um, in 2010, 2011, where I was like, I don't feel like I want to continue this path. Like it's not
mm,
serving me. I enjoy teaching on a daily basis. Like I enjoy the joy of working with people, but I didn't see that as a future.
mm.
And I was talking to my husband, and he said, "Well, why don't you actually do something with your skills?" Because by that time, I mean, not just the teaching skills, but with the other skills and the trainings
Right,
and
right.
things that I,
Facilitation
the
and
public
training.
health
Sure.
and all of that,
Hmm.
because that was where I was really passionate.
Hmm.
And I by that time had done coaching training and mindfulness teacher training and things like that. So I kind of brought it all together and began my business. Um, and I think, look, to be really honest, I think I struggled at the beginning because I'm not a business-minded person. I'm a creative person and I'm a sort of
Hmm.
people person. And
Hmm.
the business part of it was something that just had to be learned in order to actually
It's
run the
an ac-
business.
yeah, an acquired taste, right?
Exactly, exactly. And yeah, so I hesitated a lot in that
Hmm.
first year.
Of course.
And then one year I had this particularly strong experience during the year, a couple of experiences, and it really made me think, well, this I'm going to do this because if it's not now, when is it going to be?
Yeah, exactly.
So what happened was first of all, both of my grandparents passed away. My grandmothers, sorry, my father's grandmother, my father's mother, and my mother's mother. So
Mm.
this happened sort of within the space of 6 months.
Oh.
But within that time, because I was teaching, I was on casual hours, so I had a day off. and I was going out to the shops, and I walked out of my house, and across the road, this is sort of residential Sydney. Across the road, I saw a man lying face down on the ground, and it wasn't,
Mm.
I didn't know what to do. So I ran across the road, and I sort of tried to roll him over, and I discovered that he was unconscious, and I called out for help, and a neighbor came running, and between us we gave him CPR. So we went through the CPR process
Mm-hmm.
while calling an ambulance. So I ended up performing CPR on this man for probably 20 minutes or 20 to
Wow.
30 minutes.
Mm.
And then the ambulance came along and, gave him the defib. They
Mm-hmm.
restored some semblance of a heartbeat
Mm.
and took him off to hospital. And I remember the ambulance driver looked at me and said, "And you're coming with us." And I was like, "Why would I be going?"
Who,
And she
me?
said, "Yeah." And I was in shock.
Mhm.
So they took me in to treat me for shock because it
Oh,
was a very unexpected experience.
yeah.
Um, and the man unfortunately did pass away a few days later.
Mm.
I spent time with his family
Mm.
and his partner, and they sort of brought me in and talked to me, and they were pleased that there was somebody with him, that
Wow.
could spend those moments with him.
Mm.
But definitely that stuck with me. That was 2013, and it just gave me this wake up call on, first of all, just people's health and well-being.
Yeah.
And just, I was holding myself back. I was my own roadblock
Mm.
in running my business, and there was no need to be doing that. So I
Mm.
just, started to really give it my all. I kind of took away those barriers I was holding back myself with, and yeah, and just gave it all. So yeah, that's where it began really. I would
Mm.
say 2013 was the origin, the real
Yeah.
origin.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the story and the context because first of all, I'm amazed that a 15-year-old wanted to, much less could, sit still long enough to meditate. Um, Most of them I know are hyperactive or moving around or something. But that's really cool that it peaked at that important time of your life. And then I love it's no time like the present. And
Mm,
the passing of life oftentimes can fixate and motivate us to carpe diem, to claim those days and to really
mm,
uh, move forward in ways that we've been holding ourselves back. So I appreciate your vulnerability and transparency in sharing that story. It's
mm.
obvious that it comes from a place of great passion for you
Yeah.
to bring principles of well-being and mindfulness to companies.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the challenges that you see for companies in really adopting well-being? Mindfulness would be a technique within well-being, but to adopt a culture in which well-being is promoted.
But I think there's probably two challenges that I can think of. One is you know perhaps that sense of well-being is being placed. There's sort of the two challenges are sort of connected.
Hmm.
Being placed into a company where the actual day to day is not aligned with the values that they're preaching, sort of thing.
Hmm.
And I guess that connection is that the leadership sometimes is not on board with the change that perhaps someone in HR or someone in talent might be saying, or especially in HR or even workplace health and safety might be saying, look, let's create this culture, but the buy-in from the board or from the top level is not there. And really, I think the most effective programs are the ones that are lived and breathed by, all areas of the company.
Hmm.
So bringing in the grassroots, buy-in. So we've got people on the floor who are keen and interested and involved and, co-designing the programs, but also that leadership are modeling those same values. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns or issues. And then, is this all aligned with the actual vision and values of the company? Because if there's a mismatch, either a mismatch in the vision and the values with what they're trying to get going, or if like I said, the leadership or there's you know they're saying one thing but doing another. So on the job, it's a whole different message.
Mm.
Then
Yeah.
it can go backwards. It can be even not work, but it could actually work negatively and
Oh
have a
yeah.
really
Yeah.
poor impact.
So if we espouse a value of work-life balance, I think
Mm.
work-life harmony is a better way of thinking about it. But anyway,
Yeah.
let's just say we're talking about work-life balance, and then your boss is sending an email at 2 o'clock in the morning and wanting a reply
Mm.
as soon as possible, right? That
Yes,
disconnect really is disingenuous at best, but it fractures and removes trust from the
exactly.
culture, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I think the biggest hurdle is probably having leadership understand the value of
Mhm.
well-being and really
Mhm.
appreciating. And it's not hard when I work with leaders. I've worked with a group of leaders recently, and we had this conversation where I helped them to sort of self-reflect and understand, well, how do you feel when you're not your best? How do you feel when you're not,
Mm.
getting enough sleep, or your nutrition is
Mhm.
poor, or you've had some personal concerns at home, and then you're rolling up to work. Like everybody who commented, they gave me all of the phrases: snappy, irritable, frustrated, tired. And I said, well, we just need to sort of take this concept and apply it to the groups of people at work, because that's exactly what they're bringing in. And just developing that self-awareness and self-reflection, I think, is really helpful, and probably not done enough. Perhaps
Mm.
building up that sense of self-awareness in the leadership is one of the biggest keys, because ultimately, they're going to drive those final decisions on how much are they going to spend on this, and is it a perk that's just for the job ad, or is it actually something that's going to, that they really want to move the needle on?
Yeah, I love what you're talking about here, Ruth, because it just can't be an add-on. You can't bolt on a wellness program, right, or a well-being
Yeah,
program. You've really got to integrate it throughout all the functions and operations of the company,
yeah.
from the top down, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, a lot of the time, well-being, wellness, it's had a bit of a bad rap over the years.
Mm.
Sometimes especially lately, there's a bit of a narrative that we don't need yoga and fruit bowls. That's a very common sort of phrase here in Australia. Like,
Oh, is it?
why, yeah, why give yoga and fruit bowls when, people are overloaded, and their job, they don't have work-life balance, and their workplace isn't supporting them with the workload.
Mm.
So that's when we talk about that band-aid effect. But I think what we really need to do is step back and say, well, how can this be integrated? We do need to look at the
Mhm.
workload, or the culture, and the way things, their work balance is performing, or if there's bullying and harassment. Like, those are very important things to look at. But that doesn't mean we have to throw away any of the other aspects of health and well-being that we can support people with, because they are just as important and just as helpful. And I think, with that public health perspective, I look at things and say, well,
Mm.
sometimes it's because they have rolled out, like HR have rolled out what they think is a great program, but it's very much from their personal perspective, without looking at, well, who is receiving this program? Is it, first of all, something that they want?
Mm.
Is it adequate for their needs? And have you consulted with them on it? And
Yeah.
also, are you communicating this in a way that they will pick up on it? Because a lot of the times something will be rolled out, like a meditation program, but perhaps the methods of communication aren't going to reach the demographics of that group, depending
Right.
on,
Right.
yeah, are they people in there? Are you sending it out as an SMS when it's a group of people who never look at SMSs, or are you, where are you actually transmitting this information, and
Uh-huh.
is it
Yeah.
something that people are going to receive? So yeah, that's the sort of thing where I think sometimes there's been a mismatch.
So we have to keep the stakeholders in mind. Who's the intended
Absolutely.
audience? How do they communicate? What are their needs? What are their perceived needs? What are their desires? So what are some of
Yeah.
the benefits of making sure that well-being is integrated into a company's culture?
Oh, look, I mean, it's huge, right? And again, I come back to that. How do you feel when you've had this when you've had a good sleep and when you've looked after yourself? And
Hmm.
so I think I think we can take a look at the way that people work together. And I think the development of self-awareness is super, super important. So I'd say when I'm doing any kind of work, I often refer back to a lot of self-reflection because I think that's where the real growth is. When we look at emotional intelligence, we talk about self-awareness and self-regulation.
Hmm.
Whether that's around personal choices, my own self-regulation or my own self-awareness might help me to make decisions around, well, I really should go to sleep now, or I really should, maybe watch what I'm eating, or maybe not have that second drink. So I'm paying attention to myself, but then that builds out to social awareness also, and the
Hmm.
social activation and your ability to have empathy for other people.
Hmm.
So, I'd say anything that you're rolling out, if it's helping to build in that self-awareness, it has this sort of ripple effect on all other decision making that happens.
Hmm.
And that's what I often find. So when we think of that concept of self-efficacy, where it's your belief in your ability to make a change in a particular area, you might, for example, have some kind of program. Like I do a lot of training in stress management or breathing techniques, or like I said, sleep hygiene, and or the ability to have trusting conversations between team members and things like that. I often find that I'll have people come back and they'll say, I tried this particular, I tried box breathing, and then I showed it to my granddaughter, and then
Uh,
it's
uh-huh.
changed my life because I do it every day before I go to sleep now, and I have a
Mm.
much better sleep. So after doing this, which seems really small because it's a 5-minute breathing practice, this kind of ripples out to, well, I wonder what else I could do,
Mm.
and so that self-efficacy starts to grow around health
Mm.
behavior. When we
Hmm.
talk about, health behavior and self-efficacy, we're talking a lot about a person's identity and the way they see themselves. So when you can help them to understand, maybe I'm not that person. So maybe I always thought I was the kind of person who stayed up late and watched, too many shows, but actually maybe I'm not that person anymore. And so there's that self-reflection that comes in. So all of this to say that I think when these small changes take place and that self-efficacy grows, the personal growth happens, and the self-reflection happens, then this starts to permeate out into, well, what's going on across the team, the conversations across the
Hmm.
team. There
Hmm.
tends to be a ripple effect that
Hmm.
takes place. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, the benefits for the organization are that they've got people turning up that are healthier and happier and more productive. And I was talking with someone just yesterday about this. Sometimes, I mean, you have the immediate effects. You've got people who feel better, they're turning up
Hmm.
with better
Hmm.
sleep and
Hmm.
more rested and able to make better decisions and make less mistakes on the job. That's usually very immediate, especially like something like sleep, where if you're getting less than 6 or 7 hours, it's similar to driving under the influence of alcohol, over
Hmm.
the limit, over the legal
Hmm.
limit. So
Hmm.
when you've got people turning up to work who are more rested, the ripple effect on that is just, really profound.
Oh, it really is. And absenteeism comes down, and
Exactly.
when they're there, they're more fully productive. And I want to talk about that self-efficacy for just a moment, because if I begin to believe that I can make these small changes in my life and improve my life, then it opens me up to transformational opportunities at work. And so
Absolutely.
innovation and
Yes.
creativity begin to pop up in ways that we might not have ever imagined. Ruth Kent is my
Yes.
guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Down in the show notes, as I mentioned earlier, we've got her LinkedIn profile. Also, you will see her website, sunrisewell.com.au, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we find when we go there. So let's say for a moment, Ruth, that we have integrated well-being. We understand self-efficacy is not just for the self, but there's a social dynamic to it, and there's a business benefit to it because my
Mm.
absenteeism has come down. The people who are there are better rested, and therefore their work productivity goes up. Their innovation and creativity is limitless at this point. How do I, when I'm talking to top talent, how do I talk about this kind of culture? Because it's almost countercultural to what we see in so many places. The fruit bowls and yoga is more pervasive out there, right?
Mm,
Which
mm.
is what makes your work so important. But how do I have a conversation with top talent to describe this kind of culture?
Yeah, look, I think sometimes reputation speaks for itself. So I
Hmm.
think
Okay.
that's an important message to get out there that many people I'm seeing more and more digitally, I guess, in our digital world, more and more that it's just what you see people living. And when they're, for example, on LinkedIn or, they're talking about the benefits of things that they're doing in their company and they're
Hmm.
genuinely happy about it.
Hmm.
This in itself, I think, is speaks louder than words in many ways. And so, I'm seeing companies, for example, here in Australia with a very flexible working environment. People can work from anywhere. They're very well supported.
Hmm.
They have a 4-day work week at the moment, and
Hmm.
the trial that they ran has been continued. And
Hmm.
then on top of that, there are all these sort of benefits around, like I said, the flexible working, but also the health support that they're offered. And you just see people talking about it. So I would say sometimes it's not even always necessary to talk about it if your culture speaks for itself.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
very often, we have also that whole generational thing that's going on at the moment where we have that big mix of generations
We do,
in
don't we?
the
Four and
companies.
sometimes five generations working in the same company.
Exactly. And we have younger generations coming in with the expectation that they will be working in workplaces or they will choose workplaces where those benefits are there.
Hmm.
So if you're talking about people who are coming into the workforce that you think can move into leadership, I would be talking to them about, we are not just offering this as a perk. This is actually what we're living. This is the
Hmm.
ethos of the company. There's
Hmm.
whatever you've decided to be the vision and the values of your company and the sustainability of the company.
Yeah.
We look at sustainability, we need to understand that we need sustainability of the people as well. So I would be talking to them about that and your understanding of that, that you appreciate and understand that this is actually of key importance for you. And I think that can be transmitted to those people to help them to understand that you are investing. It's not just a perk, it's actually what you're living and breathing.
I love that you're investing in the well-being of your employees.
Mm.
And that, of course, creates more sustainability for the company as well as their lives and their families' lives. Ruth, let me ask you a question. What if the key to growing your work culture hides in plain sight? Take the free Work Positive Culture Assessment to discover it. Get insights in less than 4 minutes that transform your culture so you grow people and profits. You just answer 13 simple questions and discover your culture stage, strengths, and personalized next steps. Get your free aha culture moment at workpositive.today. Go to workpositive.today right now.
Yes.
Kent is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Sunrisewell.com.au. I gotta ask, where'd you come up with Sunrise Well?
You know what? I think it all comes back down to there's a Marcus Aurelius quote. I'm probably not going to say it perfectly, but he says something like, "When you wake up each morning, remember what it is to live, breathe, love." And I can't remember the exact
Yeah,
words right
I'm
now,
familiar with
but
it. Yeah,
yeah, and that was sort of that's where it comes from. Each
I
day is a
love it.
beginning. The beginning to of a new day where you can make the most of your life.
I love it. I love it. So when we go to sunrisewell.com.au, what are we going to find, Ruth?
Good question. So I have obviously all of my services on there. I do a lot of training, plenty of training, on face to face and also on Teams and on Zoom. So
Uh,
plenty of training offers there, and lots of executive coaching as well.
mhm.
Those are two of the biggest programs that I offer. And yeah, so I also have a lot of resources that are available on there that I can share in the show notes. I have a couple of resources that I offer my trainees that I'm happy for people to grab and share with their teams as well. So there's a sort of like a well-being checklist for people who need accountability, so they can sort of
Mhm.
check off some things that keep them on track over the days and the weeks to get their well-being on track. So some of
Right.
those kinds of resources I think can be very helpful for people who need accountability and some kind of framework to keep them on track.
Yeah, well, who doesn't need accountability for those
Yeah.
days when I just don't feel like it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Work Positive Nation always wants to know from my guest. So, Ruth Kent, I've got to ask you, what's one thing Work Positive Nation can do starting today to create the kind of positive work culture of well-being we're talking about?
I think let's go back just to yourself and spend some time in self-reflection. So whether that's meditation or just taking a few breaths on your own, for a couple of minutes every day, I would suggest before going into the workplace or before a meeting, and notice for yourself, no matter where you are in the business, at what how that makes you feel. And that just creating that little pause, that little moment where you get that self-reflection. I would say that that's a good place to start because, as we've talked about today, I think building that self-awareness is one of the first steps to building awareness around your interactions with other people and your decisions. So I would say start there.
Great starting place. Ruth, thank you so much. I have learned so much from you. Your contributions are immense, and all of us have something new to go back and do now, or well,
Thank
many,
you.
many of us do. So thanks for helping us, in some ways, giving us permission to take care of our own well-being, which permeates the culture around us as well. I've learned a lot. I know Work Positive Nation has learned a lot. So Work Positive Nation, go to sunrisewell.com.au and check out Ruth Kent's free resources there and her other services as well. Ruth, thank you so much for being my guest on Work Positive Radio, Work Positive Podcast today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joey. It's been fantastic to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful you joined our conversation about creating positive work cultures that grow people and profits. Connect with me directly on LinkedIn today. Just search for Dr. Joey Fawcett, or you can click the link in your show notes. When you send your connection request, mention you're a Work Positive Podcast listener because I want to give you a free digital copy of my Work Positive Team Edition book. It's a $19.95 value, but I want to share it with you free because it contains practical strategies that I personally use with clients to transform toxic work environments into thriving cultures. We explore in that book how to create a positive work culture, and we do so again in every episode of this podcast. Our LinkedIn connection allows you and me to directly talk about your specific challenges, so feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn. I personally read and respond to all those messages because I genuinely care about your work positive success. So go to LinkedIn and let's connect. Remember to mention you're a podcast listener to receive your free Work Positive Team Edition book. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of the Work Positive Podcast.